Missing someone, love with all your heart. Missing someone, love with heart.
What's up guys, welcome back to my channel. In this week's episode I'm going to show you this client of mine who has virgin hair down to her butt. So we're going to be balayaging the ends. Her goal is to be kind of like a smoky blue color, so I'm going to be doing some weaving and teasing to kind of brighten up the ends and try to get it as light as possible. Her hair texture is super thick and I would say she's probably a level 2 naturally, so we're going to work on trimming her hair, getting those ends nice and healthy, and then giving her some fun color at the end. So for my client's balayage, we are going for something lower maintenance. So we are going to have the balayage pretty much start and transition right around where like her ear and shoulders are. She doesn't want the balayage to be too high up, and whenever a client doesn't want it all the way to the root like that, I always like to do some nice teasing so that it looks nice and rooty and blended. And so for this technique, I'm going to be just pretty much teasing her whole head, and in the beginning here I'm taking slices and then teasing it. You can see as I tease the hair, I do one tease all the way from the bottom, and because her hair is so long, that tease will kind of stop midway, and then I'll kind of re-tease it again at that midway section. I don't like to overly tease the hair because that will cause a lot more tangles and be really difficult to brush out at the bowl, but I'll try and give a really nice soft big 1 or 2 teases so that it kind of buffers the line a bit. And so you can see my sections are pretty see-through. After I tease the hair, you can definitely see through the hair on the foil. This is going to make sure that I get a really good application. Everything is nice and saturated, and because again her hair is super thick and dark, we want to get as much lift as possible. So taking those very thin paper sections are really going to help to get maximum amount of lift. So for my lightener guys, I am using the Blonde Me Schwarzkopf lightener, and I started with a bowl of 6 and 20. But here, normally if I were doing like a traditional highlight just root, I would probably just mix up like 60 to 100 grams of developer and then mix that 1 to 2 with the powder. But since we're doing such a long application and she has so much hair, I like to have my assistant just mix me up a double. So I'll have her start off with like 200 grams of the developer to 100 grams of the powder, and then from then on I switched it up to 20 volume, and then I made her mix like about 300 grams of the developer to 150 grams of the Blonde Me powder. That way, mixing in larger quantities, I'm going to go through it super quickly, so it just makes it go by a lot quicker. So for her technique, those first few slices, I went ahead and just did it pretty much solid. But as I get towards the middle section of the back here, I am starting to alternate doing like a weave. So I'll tease the hair just very softly 1 to 2 times, or like 2 to 3 times, and then I will weave the hair in like 2 chunks or 3 chunks, and then just apply the lightener. And as I'm applying the lightener, I will try to kind of give a slight like gradient. So I'll paint a little bit higher up closer to the face, and I'll paint a little bit lower down as it gets closer to the middle of the back of the head. In addition to alternating my weave sectioning, I also like to alternate the way how high I bring up the lightener. So some sections I'll bring up a little bit higher, and some sections I will paint a little bit lower. This is going to give a really nice soft blend. You guys will see later that I don't really have to shadow root her hair so much, because this alone is going to give the most seamless blend when doing the weave and tease combination together. And then in this top triangle section, I do like to take even smaller weaves than the underneath just to ensure that everything is nicely blended. And also when I'm painting onto these weaved out sections, I am trying to make like V shapes or W shapes to kind of create a very soft and seamless transition so that everything is kind of lighter around her face and kind of brings it up like a slight gradient around her face. So as I get towards the front here, I am doing a slice of a weave right at the start of it, because right here at the hairline, the hair is a bit finer, so I just want to do a nice bold piece here. And again, I am painting a little bit higher up towards the face and painting a little bit lower down as we get towards the back to again create that nice soft gradient. After that section, I am taking diagonal backs and I am slightly over directing a little bit closer towards the front of the face with each section. So with each section, I'm over directing past the previous section so that everything kind of gives a very nice soft gradient. So basically what the over direction does is as I over direct towards the face with each section that I take, that part of the hair that I paint will come up a little bit higher than the back section. Now for the money piece, I'm just doing a few slices and weaving them back to back, and I'm strategically trying to find the placement of how high I want this money piece to be according to how high the sides are. So this part you got to take into consideration and visually see and make sure that everything is even and equal on each side. When you're painting too, sometimes I'll try to like make some sort of like landmark or pinpoint where I put the highest point of blend. So for this instance, when I was blending her hair, I was looking at her face mask and just seeing how high that I wouldn't go paint past her face mask. And so with the front money piece section, I'm going to go slightly past her face mask, so that is going to be a little bit higher just around her face, and this again is going to create that nice beautiful gradient teardrop look at the end. So once I was done foiling her whole head, I let my client process like under the dryer a little bit. Since her foils were just so long, I had to pop them in the dryer, otherwise some of it would lift unevenly because of the body heat and all of that, especially on this length of hair. So I processed her under the dryer just like on medium heat, just to kind of mimic body heat, and then I let the foils process to about a level, like I would say she got to a nice clean level 8 and 9. It wasn't as light as I would like to, but for her first session and considering how dark and the texture of her hair was just so thick, I felt like this was pretty good. Blues can be very tricky because you need to lift the hair pretty light for the blue to be a pretty blue, or otherwise it kind of turns out a little bit tealy. So especially since she wanted to do kind of like a grayish blue, we had to try and lift her as light as possible. So she got to, in some areas, a level 9 and 10, and then some areas were a level 8. So we are going to pre-tone her hair before we apply the blue semi. So for my pre-toner, I am using the Pulpbrite Rapid toners, and I just mixed up silver and violet. I did about 30 grams of the violet to 20 grams of silver, and then I did double developer, so I did 100 grams of 6 volume after that to kind of dilute the color. And I began to apply this in the midsection and then let that process, because again, since we did a balayage and teased it, that midsection is going to be slightly warmer wherever it meets the dark. So I want that to tone out as much warmth as possible before we put on the blue semi. Also, I didn't get clips of how we got the tangles out or the teases. So basically, whenever I tease my client's hair, I like to kind of rinse out the lightener wherever it is on the ends, and then I try to avoid the root tease as much as possible, because once you wet it, it gets really difficult to kind of brush out. So I try and rinse out the ends as much as possible, and you can even towel dry if some of the tease gets a little wet. And then I like to separate the teases with my fingers first, and then start brushing it out. And I find that it's a lot easier to kind of separate the teases with your hands before brushing everything out. Okay, so once I was done applying that rapid toner on that midsection where the balayage meets her natural, I started to brush it out, and I can see that it's starting to tone the hair. So then after this part, I did started to apply it on the rest of the hair on the ends, and then I let that process for about like 10 to 15 minutes, and I started to see it go a little bit more on the grayer side. And so I rinsed it out before it got a little too dark, because that toner formulation can turn into a really deep gray. So I definitely rinsed it out before it got too dark, because we are going to be putting a blue semitone right on after this. So the reason why I chose to pre-tone, I normally don't unless a client wants kind of a grayish tone. So basically this toner is pretty much a gray toner, and so this is going to give that nice ashy gray background color. And then once we're done with this part, I'm going to go in and add the blue tone. So I didn't get a clip of it, but I pretty much washed out this toner and then mixed up a blue semi, and I just applied it on the hair at the bowl like this in sections like I would toning normally, and I let this just process for about like 10 to 15 minutes and then rinsed it with cold water. So I didn't blow dry the hair before applying the semi. I just completely towel dried it and applied it right over whatever toner sheet, like whatever her hair looked like after we toned it. Alrighty guys, so here is her finished look. For the blue formulation, I ended up using Blue Muse Tragic Elixir and some clear from the Pulp Bright Semis, and I applied that onto her hair after I had pre-toned her with the rapid toners. So that's how it came out, nice and ashy and kind of bluish gray. Also, another thing that I always like to mention whenever a client wants this type of color is that this tone fades out very quickly, and when it fades green. So some of the things that you can try to do to maintain the color as much as possible is to get some of the Pulp Bright Barcelona Purple shampoo and maybe refresh the color with a color balm at home. Alrighty guys, so that is it for this week's episode. Thank you guys so much for watching and tuning in, and as always, I will talk to you guys next week.